You ever feel a storm coming long before the clouds show up? That's exactly how it felt the day my daughter, Marissa, and her husband, Dylan, came stomping up my porch like they owned the place. Now listen, sugar. I'm a 72-year-old lady with a creaky hip, a soft voice, and a whole lot of patience. But even patience has limits. And theirs? Oh, theirs had been wearing thin for a long, long time. They didn't even knock. Dylan just swung my door open like he was checking into a motel. "Hey, Mom," Marissa said, with that syrupy sweet voice she only uses when she wants something. "We need to talk, now." There it was. The real reason for their visit. Not to bring me groceries, not to check on my health, not to share a cup of coffee. Nope. They came for one thing. Money. I eased myself into my armchair, watching the two of them circle my living room like sharks sniffing around a wounded fish. Dylan cleared his throat. "So, we heard something interesting, Margaret." "Yes, dear. That's my name now. Margaret, because we don't keep competitor names." I lifted an eyebrow. "Is that right?" Marissa sat on the edge of my coffee table, like she couldn't wait to pounce. "Mom, how much do you get from your pension each month?" There it was. The question they'd rehearsed in the car 100 times. I didn't answer. I just let the silence hang in the air, heavy enough to choke them both. Dylan leaned forward. "We're family, Margaret. Like, we deserve to know. And besides, since we're struggling a bit," I cut him off with a laugh. Not a big one. Just a soft, tired chuckle. "You two ain't struggling," I said. "You're reckless. There's a difference." Marissa's face twisted. "Mom, don't start. We're just asking, and honestly," she put her hand on her hip, like she was talking to one of her students, even though she hadn't held a steady job in 2 years. "We were thinking, maybe it's fair if we get 50%. I tapped my cane lightly on the floor. 50% of my retirement? She nodded, dead serious. I almost laughed again, but instead, I smiled. A slow, steady smile. The kind that made Dylan shift uncomfortably. "All right," I said. "If that's what you want, then you can have it." Their eyes lit up so fast, you'd swear someone turned on the Christmas lights. "But," I added, reaching down beside my chair, "I want y'all to see something first." I pulled out the black folder I had prepared months earlier. Thick, organized, labeled, a whole binder full of everything they didn't want to know. "Here," I said, handing it to Marissa. "You want half? Fine. But open this first." She flipped it open, her smile still stuck on her face, for about 3 seconds. Then it slid right off. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened, her hands started to shake, because inside that folder wasn't what she expected. It was a full legal package. Paperwork documenting every manipulative stunt, every time they pressured me, every bank request they'd tried to push, every threat they'd made when I refused to help with their shopping sprees and vacation plans. Signed statements, saved messages, printed screenshots, bank logs, all notarized, all dated. Marissa's lips trembled. "Mom, what is this?" I leaned back, folded my hands, and said softly, "Baby, this is what you earned." Dylan snatched the folder from her hands and flipped through it, face turning from pink to pale to ghost white. You set us up," he stammered. "No," I corrected him gently. I prepared myself. There's a difference. Marissa stood up so quickly, the table rattled. You think you can just guilt trip us? You think this folder scares us? Oh, sweetheart, I said. This folder ain't meant to scare you. I leaned in a little closer. It's meant to warn you. And right then, right in that moment, the front door slammed open again. But it wasn't a person. It was the wind. A sudden gust blew through the house, scattering loose papers from the folder across the floor like falling snow. Dylan bent down to grab them and froze. Because one of those pages, one he hadn't seen yet, was on bright red legal paper. He picked it up, read it, stared at me. Margaret, what the hell is this? I smiled again. Oh, honey, that's the part you really don't want to know. His face drained to white. Marissa gasped. And right then, both of them realized they weren't in control anymore. Not even a little. Dylan stared at that red sheet like it might bite him. His fingers twitched as he held it up, the edge trembling in the sunlight creeping through my curtains. Marissa leaned over his shoulder, eyes narrowing. What's that supposed to mean? She asked, her voice suddenly small. I folded my hands in my lap and let the moment settle. Because sometimes silence teaches louder than any lecture. That, I said finally, is documentation of the decision I made 3 months ago. Dylan swallowed, hard. And what decision is that? I met with my lawyer, I said calmly. We reviewed everything. Your behavior, your demands, the pressure you kept putting on me, and we decided on a protection plan. Marissa blinked at me, like she didn't understand English. Dylan did. He looked back at the red page, his eyes scanning the bold black letters across the top. Petition for protective oversight and financial guardianship denial. He stammered. You filed something against us? I tilted my head. Baby, y'all tried to file something against me first. You could have heard a pin drop because they hadn't expected me to know. But I did. I knew all about the little forms they'd downloaded. I knew about the appointment they scheduled with a legal assistant just to get advice. I knew how they whispered about trying to get access to my accounts for safety, pretending it was for my benefit. But the truth was simple. They wanted my pension. They wanted my house. They wanted full control. So yes, I continued softly, I filed a preventive denial. So if anyone ever tries to take over my finances, the court already knows the truth. Marissa slowly shook her head. Mom, how could you think we'd ever... Oh, sweetheart. I cut in gently. I didn't think it. I watched it. Dylan's jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. This is insane, he muttered. You're overreacting. We just needed help. No, I said, raising a finger. You wanted ownership. That's different. Marissa's eyes started to glisten with angry tears. Why would you go behind our backs like this? Why? I repeated, chuckling softly. Because someday y'all were gonna come asking for half my retirement. And look at that. Here we are. She flinched like I'd slapped her. The wind blew again, rustling the paper scattered across my rug. Dylan bent down to scoop them up angrily. But as he reached for another page, his expression twisted again. It wasn't the red sheet this time. It was the black and white copies of the messages he hoped I'd deleted. Screenshots. voice note transcripts, the ones where he joked about old people not needing that much money. The ones where Marissa said, I better start sharing now before she dies. The ones where they plan to get access before she gets stubborn. Dylan's face lost all color. Marissa's knees wobbled. I let them read every single ugly line of their own intentions. Then I spoke. I didn't keep these to hurt you, I said. I kept them because I needed proof. Proof y'all weren't just asking for help. You were planning to strip me bare. Marissa's lip quivered. Mom, please. No, I said firmly. Not this time. Y'all stepped over the line the day you decided my life savings were family money. Dylan set the papers down, breathing hard. Okay, he said finally. Fine. You made your point. Just tell us what you want. What I want? I repeated slowly. I rubbed my thumb across the handle of my cane, thinking carefully. I want you to understand, I said, that my retirement is not a group project. Marissa closed her eyes, like the words physically hurt her. But why the folder? She asked. Why make it look like we're criminals? Because, I answered, I needed you to see how serious this is. Because kindness didn't work. Because boundaries didn't work. Because asking nicely didn't work. Dylan scoffed. What do you want from us then? An apology? No, I said. I don't want anything from you. And that right there, that simple sentence, hit them harder than anything else. Because people who expect to use you hate hearing they have nothing left to take. Marissa looked like she might collapse. Her voice cracked. Mom, we're your family. I know, I said softly. And that's exactly why I'm doing this. The room got quiet. Air thick as soup. Then I stood up, slow, careful, steady, and walked to the wooden box on the shelf near my window. I opened it. Inside was another envelope, a sealed one, deep blue, embossed, heavier than it looked. When I turned back to them, they both stared at it like it was a ticking bomb. What's that? Dylan asked, his voice suddenly low. I smiled faintly. This, I said, is the part you absolutely did not expect. Their eyes locked on the envelope, their shoulders tensed. Marissa took a tiny step backward, and watching the fear bloom in their faces, I realized they were finally understanding. I wasn't the fragile woman they thought they could push around. Dylan's hands hovered over the blue envelope like it was about to bite him. Marissa backed up a step, her eyes wide and fixed on me, as if she was waiting for some hidden trick to explode from my hands. I set my cane against the chair and rested both hands on the envelope. I know what you're thinking, I said, my voice calm, deliberate. You're thinking this is another threat, another stunt, another one of Mom's little tricks to make you scared. Dylan's jaw tightened. It better not be, Mom, he muttered. I met his gaze evenly. It's not a threat, I said. It's a reality check. It's everything you never wanted to see. I carefully slid the flap open, letting the blue envelope fall slightly forward so they could peek inside without touching it. And there it was, another folder. One that contained detailed financial statements, bank transaction histories, copies of all correspondence, and documentation of every loan and favor I had ever extended to them. Dylan's eyes went wide. Marissa's mouth fell open. This is insane, Dylan said, his voice barely audible. It's not insane, I corrected. It's what happens when you realize that someone is serious about their own dignity. Marissa's hands were trembling. She reached out instinctively, but pulled them back. Mom, why did you keep all this? I leaned back in my chair, letting my fingers trace the edge of the envelope. Because, honey, it's one thing to give, to love, to help, and it's another to be taken for granted. I raised you both alone, supported you, and yes, I lent you money when you asked for it. But I never signed up to be manipulated. I never signed up to be your personal ATM. Dylan swallowed, his usual bravado melting into something raw. We didn't mean. You didn't mean? I repeated sharply. You plotted, schemed, and tried to pressure me. You thought I wouldn't notice? And now you're acting like you're innocent? Like you're the victims? Marissa's eyes filled with tears. But it wasn't just fear. There was confusion, anger, and a flicker of guilt, maybe. You went through all of this because you don't trust us? Dylan asked, his voice quieter now. No, I said, letting a slow breath out. I went through all of this because you proved over and over that I couldn't trust you, and because love doesn't demand money. Love doesn't threaten legal action. Love doesn't try to destroy the person who raised you. Marissa looked away, biting her lips so hard it almost drew blood. We never saw it that way. You never saw it that way, I said gently, because you've been seeing it all wrong for years. You thought my money, my house, my life was yours to manipulate, but it isn't. And that's the part you finally need to understand. The room was heavy with silence. Their eyes darted between me, the blue envelope, and the stack of documents on the table. Then Dylan spoke again, his voice lower this time, almost defeated. So, what happens now? I smiled faintly. Not the warm, inviting smile, but the one that comes with knowing you've won a war without firing a single shot. Now, I said, now you understand boundaries. Now you understand consequences. And now you live with the reality of the choices you made. Marissa's shoulders sagged. Mom, please. It doesn't have to be like this. We can fix it, can't we? I shook my head slowly. I gave you the chance to fix it months ago. You chose the fight instead of reflection. You chose manipulation instead of respect. And that choice has consequences. Every action has consequences. Dylan looked like he wanted to argue, but the words caught in his throat. He glanced at Marissa, who was trembling next to him, and I saw for the first time the weight of what they had done. The reality was sinking in. I stood up, cane in hand, and walked slowly to the window. Sunlight streamed across the room, highlighting the stack of documents and the blue envelope, almost like a spotlight on truth. I'm not angry anymore, I said, turning my gaze back to them. I'm relieved that I finally drew the line. Relieved that you can't use fear or guilt to control me. And relieved that I'll never have to live in constant anxiety because of your decisions again. Dylan's face twisted with disbelief. Marissa's lip quivered. They both knew I wasn't bluffing. I hope, I continued softly, that someday you'll understand why I did this. Maybe years from now, you'll see that protecting myself wasn't cruel. It was necessary. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. Then, without another word, Dylan grabbed Marissa's hand, and they turned toward the door. As they left, I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel triumph. I felt finally free. Sarah, who had been waiting quietly in the living room, walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. "I'm better than okay. I'm at peace, because for the first time in years, I wasn't just standing my ground. I had taken back my life, and nothing they could do would change that." The red and blue papers sat on the table, a reminder of what had been and what I refused to allow anymore. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and let the silence wrap around me. Freedom, I realized, tasted a lot like quiet strength. The morning after Dylan and Marissa left, I felt an unfamiliar quiet hanging over the house. No phones ringing, no whispers at the door, no tension pressing down like a weight on my chest. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. Then, the first ripple hit. It was a voicemail, unknown number. I froze, letting the message play slowly, each word sinking like ice in my stomach. "Mrs. Harper," a deep voice said, calm but sharp. "We are calling regarding your daughter and son-in-law. This is a routine investigation. Please call us back immediately." I hung up, heart racing. I knew this game. Natalie and Dylan were already trying to stir the pot, using every avenue they could find. Adult Protective Services, anonymous complaints, all the moves I'd anticipated. But knowing it and facing it were two different things. I called Sarah immediately. "You're not going to believe this," I said, pacing my kitchen. Sarah's voice was steady, but I could hear the tension under it. "I believe it. They're not going to quit. Not now. Not ever. You know this." "I know," I said, gripping the edge of the counter. I thought the envelope, the confrontation, I thought that would be enough. But it's never enough for them." She paused. "Then we make it enough. You and me, we're ready for whatever they throw. And remember, every time they try, we're documenting it. Every single time." I nodded. That was the truth. That was my armor now. A few days later, I found out how deep they were willing to go. A neighbor, someone I'd known for over a decade, stopped by with a concerned look. "Evelyn, I just wanted to ask, is it true? Are you really cutting your daughter out like that? People are talking." I took a slow breath. People will always talk. But the truth? The truth is, I'm standing up for myself. I'm protecting myself from people who've tried to manipulate me my whole life. The neighbor hesitated, eyes flicking away like she didn't want to offend me, but wasn't sure what to believe. I don't know what to say. It's just hard to imagine." "Yeah," I said softly. "I get that. It's hard for people to see the other side when they're only hearing one version." That night, I lay awake thinking about what was coming. Social media posts, rumors, neighborhood gossip. Natalie and Dylan weren't just going to let this slide. I'd seen it before. And I knew the next wave would be brutal. It came sooner than I expected. A post appeared online, tagged by someone I barely knew. It painted me as cold, selfish, and manipulative. The caption was cruel. "My poor daughter abandoned by her own mother for daring to live a normal life. Pray for her. She's heartbroken." I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a slow, simmering rage. Not this time, I whispered to myself. I grabbed my phone and called Catherine, my lawyer. Catherine, they're posting again. Online, social media, defamation. She didn't flinch. Document it. Every post, every comment, every screenshot. We add it to the case. This isn't just harassment. This is a pattern, and it proves what we already know. I felt a small spark of calm wash over me. Legal battles were messy, but I was ready. I had proof, documentation, recordings, witnesses. Everything I needed to show the truth. But even as I prepared for the fight, life outside the storm went on. I started walking in the mornings, slowly at first, letting the sun warm my face. I met Mrs. Dalton from across the street, and we started chatting about our gardens. I began volunteering at the local library, helping organize reading sessions for kids. These moments reminded me why I had fought so hard. Not just to protect my money or my house, but to protect my peace. Still, the shadows lingered. Every time the doorbell rang, my heart jumped. Every unknown number on the phone made me tense. I knew it wasn't over. I knew Dylan and Natalie were lurking, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. Then, one afternoon, I saw him. Dylan, leaning against the corner of the grocery store parking lot, sunglasses low on his nose, eyes fixed on me. My pulse quickened, but I didn't run. I didn't flinch. I pulled my shopping cart into view, making sure he saw me. He straightened, raised a hand in a mock wave, and then disappeared into the crowd. That brief encounter told me all I needed to know. They weren't giving up. And neither was I. Sarah met me at the door that night. "You saw him?" she asked, her voice low. I nodded. "Yeah, watching me, waiting." "Good. You need to know something," she said, voice firm. "Every move they make now, it proves their guilt. Every step they take trying to scare you, it's just more evidence we can use. You're already ahead." I leaned back in my chair, sipping tea, trying to absorb the truth in her words. Ahead. I was ahead. And for the first time in weeks, the fear didn't feel quite as heavy, because now I knew. I was ready. And no matter how many waves they sent at me, I was done sinking. For a few days, things felt weirdly calm. Not peaceful, not safe. Just that eerie quiet before a storm hits hard. I could feel it in my bones. When you've lived long enough, you learn to read the air like a weather report. And honey, that air was heavy. It hit on a Thursday afternoon. I was sorting laundry when the doorbell blasted through the house. 3 hard presses in a row. Not polite. Not accidental. The kind of ringing someone uses when they're trying to rattle your soul. I stood still, listening. Another 3, then a fist banging the door. "Open up, Evelyn! We know you're in there!" My heart didn't just drop, it folded up like old paper. I recognized the voice instantly. Marissa. I peeked through the side window, staying low, just like Sarah had told me. And there they were, Marissa pacing on the porch like a wolf, and Dylan standing behind her with that smug smirk that always made my skin crawl. I didn't open the door. I didn't say a word. "Evelyn," she shouted, using my name like it was an insult. "We need to talk right now. Mom-to-daughter conversation." Right. A real tight mother-daughter bond we had, if you counted manipulation, threats, and emotional mugging. They kept pounding, hard, loud, over and over. I backed away, phone in hand, and called Sarah. "They're here. I whispered. Are they inside? She asked. No, outside, screaming like lunatics. Good, do not go near the door. I'm calling the police. Stay in the kitchen and keep the phone on. I did exactly that. But I could still hear everything. You owe us answers! Where's the rest of the money? You think you can screw us over? I just listened, letting their own words bury them. Soon enough, the sirens hummed in the distance. Dylan cursed under his breath, and Marissa panicked. We're not done, she yelled toward the house, before storming off down the walkway. When the cops arrived, they were already gone. I opened the door slowly, explaining what happened. The officer wrote everything down carefully, even asked me if I wanted to file a formal report. Yes, I said, and that was a turning point. Because when you put something in writing, the world treats it differently. After they left, I sat on the couch, staring at nothing. My hands were shaking, not from fear this time, but from exhaustion. You'd think losing your peace feels like an explosion, but no. It feels like a slow leak, draining you day by day until you're hollow. Later that evening, Sarah came by with takeout. You ready for the next step? She asked, placing the bags down. I blinked. Next step? Sarah, I'm tired. I know. But the more they do, the stronger our case gets. Today was harassment, attempted intimidation, trespassing. It's all ammunition. I took a deep breath. I just never thought my own daughter would push me this far. Sarah sat beside me, her voice softer. You didn't create this version of her. You just finally refused to fund it. That sentence hit me hard. We spent the next few hours going over documents, timelines, screenshots, voicemails, the police report. Each piece was another brick in the wall protecting me from the two people who should have been my safe place. Then came the moment I'd been avoiding. Sarah slid one more paper across the coffee table. A restraining order request. My stomach twisted. Sarah, that's my daughter. That's your daughter who just tried to break your door down. I closed my eyes. She was right, and it broke something inside me to admit. I'll sign it, I whispered. She squeezed my hand gently. I know it hurts, but you're choosing safety, sanity, and dignity. That's not betrayal. That's survival. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a strange mix of sadness and strength. Losing a child is awful, but losing yourself is worse. I finally understood that. Just when I thought the worst was behind me, I got a call the next morning. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Hello? A male voice cleared his throat. Mrs. Harper, this is Detective Morales. We need you to come down to the station. Your daughter filed a report against you this morning. I froze. What kind of report? There was a pause, and his answer changed everything. Well, ma'am, she's accusing you of elder neglect. Neglect. Me. The woman who raised her, fed her, sacrificed for her. Accused of neglect by the very person trying to take half my life savings. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat down slowly, letting the truth settle over me like ashes. The war had officially begun. The call from Detective Morales hit me like a punch I hadn't seen coming. Elder neglect? Me? The woman who had spent decades working 2 jobs just to keep Marissa in school, to feed her, to clothe her, to make sure she had everything she needed. The accusation made my chest tighten. a mix of fury, disbelief, and exhaustion that weighed heavier than any suitcase I'd ever carried. I told Sarah immediately. She listened quietly, nodding along as I paced back and forth in the living room. "They'll never believe it, Sarah," I muttered. "They think lying will work in their favor. They think everyone will see me as the villain because I'm older and alone." Sarah didn't flinch. "Then we'll make sure they have no chance. Every lie, every smear, every attempt to manipulate the system, we'll counter it all. We've been preparing for this. It's just another layer." I didn't feel reassured. The legal battles were one thing, but when your own child weaponizes the law against you, it becomes personal. Every step I took felt like walking through a minefield. I had to document everything, every phone call, every visitor, every errand I ran. Even my daily meals and medication were meticulously recorded. 2 days later, I had my first interview at the station. Detective Morales was kind, but professional, reviewing the reports and taking my statements with surgical precision. I laid out everything: the threats, the harassment, the attempts to force me into handing over money, and the black binder. Each time I spoke, I felt a little more weight lift off my shoulders. Speaking the truth to someone impartial felt like punching through the fog. ... But when I left the station, the world felt heavier than before. I could feel eyes on me, neighbors staring just a little too long, whispers trailing me down the street. Social media wasn't kind either. Marissa had posted a photo of me taken a few months back, looking tired and worn, captioned with, "My elderly mother refuses help. She's cruel and selfish. Pray for her as she deteriorates." The comments rolled in, some supportive, but most laced with doubt, judgment, and pity. I felt hollow inside. Sarah was the only one I could lean on, and even she could only hold me for so long before I had to stand again on my own. We fortified the house, locks, cameras, alarms, but nothing could shield me from the psychological assault. Every sound outside made me jump. Every phone buzz sent a wave of panic through me. I started keeping my phone on speaker at night, hoping to catch any harassment in the act, each call a potential piece of evidence. Then came the day that shook me the most. I was at the grocery store, trying to keep my cart steady and my heart calm, when I saw them, Marissa and Dylan, standing near the bakery section, whispering, glancing at me with those smug expressions that always made my stomach churn. I froze. Dylan stepped forward, grinning like he owned the world. "Evelyn, we need to have a chat. Alone." I felt my blood run cold. Alone? With him? That was a trap. I held my ground. "No," I said firmly. "Step back, or I involve security." Marissa's eyes flashed with rage. "You think this ends with the courtroom? You think you can just run your life and forget about us?" I lifted my phone, recording silently. Every threat, every lie, every manipulation. It would be evidence someday. They left, muttering under their breath, and I felt my hands shake for hours. The reality hit me like a train. This wasn't over. Not even close. They had been trained all these years to see me as a resource, and suddenly, taking away that resource had broken something in them. They were dangerous, not physically, but emotionally, psychologically. They thrived on control, on chaos, on bending reality to their will. That night, Sarah and I reviewed every incident, every voicemail, every text, and every social media post. We built a timeline so intricate it could make a seasoned detective nod in approval. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival, about dignity, about keeping my mind and heart intact. I began to realize something terrifying. The battle wasn't just legal. It was mental, social, emotional. Marissa and Dylan were trying to rewrite my life in public opinion while dragging me through a personal nightmare behind closed doors. I had to stay strong. I had to outlast them. Days turned into weeks, and then into months. Every court filing Marissa sent was countered. Every rumor she spread, documented. Every public accusation answered with irrefutable proof. The stress was crushing. I had nightmares of them breaking down my door, of the neighbors turning their backs, of seeing every moment of my life spun into lies on social media. Yet despite all the chaos, something extraordinary happened. I began to find a rhythm in the chaos. I realized that peace wasn't about silence. It was about knowing you were right. Knowing you had fought with integrity. Knowing you had protected yourself and your life from those who would see it destroyed. Sarah reminded me often, we can't control what they do, Evelyn, but we can control how we respond. That's your power. And she was right. Then, one rainy afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My hands trembled as I opened it. Mom, I see things differently now. I don't expect forgiveness yet, but I'm starting to understand the weight of what I put you through. I hope you're well. I hope you find peace. Marissa. I stared at it for a long time, my chest tight, my heart both heavy and strangely light. I didn't reply. Not yet. Maybe never. But even a single flicker of understanding from her felt like a small victory. The war wasn't over, but I realized something crucial. No amount of manipulation, no threat, no accusation could take away the life I had built, the dignity I had fought for, or the peace I was determined to protect. And in that, for the first time in years, I felt a quiet kind of triumph. Morning after reading Marissa's letter, I woke up with a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. Relief that, finally, even if just a flicker, my daughter was beginning to grasp the consequences of her actions. Exhaustion, because the emotional toll of the last 2 years felt like it had aged me a decade overnight. Sarah arrived with her usual cheer, 2 steaming cups of coffee in hand. "Good morning, warrior," she said, setting the mugs down. "Sleep okay?" I forced a small smile. Better than I'd expected. Maybe that wetter did more than I realized. We sat in silence for a while, sipping our coffee, watching the rain streak the windows. I noticed that even in this small moment, life felt lighter. The constant tension, the feeling that danger or lies were lurking around every corner, had eased, if only slightly. I still had to be cautious, but there was a flicker of normalcy returning. Later that week, I received a call from Catherine. Her voice was brisk, but carried a hint of excitement. "Evelyn, the judge has officially finalized the restraining order. It's now permanent, unless they provide undeniable proof of changed behavior. And we both know that's unlikely anytime soon. You're free, legally speaking. The word free echoed in my mind. Legally, yes, but freedom didn't always feel simple. People rarely understood the cost of standing up to manipulation from someone you once trusted implicitly. The whispers, the sideways glances, the lingering doubts in neighbors' eyes, they were harder to shake off than a court order. Still, I decided to reclaim my life fully. I joined a new volunteer project at the local library, organizing reading programs for children whose parents worked multiple jobs, much like I had when raising Marissa. Being around kids reminded me of the innocence I had once protected. It reminded me why I had fought so hard to ensure someone couldn't take away a life that mattered, no matter how old you were. One afternoon, while sorting books with a group of volunteers, a young woman approached me hesitantly. "Excuse me, you're Evelyn Carter, right?" I looked up. She had kind eyes, not judgmental ones. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" She smiled nervously. "I just wanted to say, I read your story online. The one about standing up to your daughter. I don't know. It gave me courage. I've been in a similar situation, and I didn't know what to do. Seeing you, it gave me hope. I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Here was someone who understood, not the judgmental neighbors, not the gossiping acquaintances, but someone who saw my struggle for what it really was." Life began to settle into this rhythm. I spent my mornings volunteering, my afternoons tending the garden, and my evenings with Sarah or friends from the support group. The sense of constant vigilance slowly eased, replaced with purpose. I began journaling again, chronicling my experiences not as a victim, but as someone who had fought for her dignity and won. Then, one sunny afternoon, as I returned from the market, I noticed a small envelope slipped under the front door. My heart tightened, thinking it might be another manipulative attempt from Marissa or Dylan. Tears welled up as I folded the note, a silent acknowledgement that my efforts to live with integrity had ripples beyond the immediate battle. People were starting to see truth, even if slowly. Months passed, and I noticed changes in Marissa's social media presence. The posts showcasing a perfect life faded completely. I heard from mutual acquaintances that she and Dylan were struggling, facing financial strain, and had even moved from their apartment. Hearing this didn't bring joy or satisfaction. It was merely a reminder that consequences exist. Actions have weight. Choices have repercussions. Through it all, I kept the black binder in a locked drawer, a symbol of the line I had drawn, a silent guardian of my autonomy. It wasn't just paperwork. It was my declaration of independence, a constant reminder that my life was mine alone to protect and live as I saw fit. And then came a quiet evening that marked something I had not expected. I realized I hadn't felt fear for days. Not the trembling fear of being ambushed. Not the gnawing fear of lies spreading unchecked. Not the fear of seeing my daughter again in rage or manipulation. For the first time, I felt a calm that wasn't forced, a peace that wasn't tentative. I had survived, and more than that, I had thrived. That night, as I watched the sun dip below the horizon. Painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Sarah came to sit beside me on the porch with 2 cups of tea. "You're really okay, aren't you?" she asked softly. I nodded, feeling the weight of years lift just a little more. "I am, Sarah. I am. It took everything I had, but I finally feel free." And for the first time in decades, I allowed myself to believe it. Freedom wasn't just a legal term, a restraining order, or evidence in a courtroom. Freedom was peace, dignity, and the knowledge that I could live my life on my own terms, surrounded by people who truly cared, and unshaken by the manipulation of those who once called themselves family. The war was not entirely over. Marissa and Dylan were still out there, making choices that reflected their character. But I had learned the ultimate lesson. Standing up for yourself isn't cruel, it isn't selfish, and it isn't something to regret. It is survival. It is life. And I was finally living mine. The years after the courtroom battle stretched out like a quiet river, calm but full of depth. Each morning, I woke up in my home with a sense of ownership I had never truly felt before. Not just of the house, but of my life. The air felt lighter, the rooms brighter. The black binder sat on the shelf, a silent sentinel of every battle I had fought and won. Sarah and I had grown closer than ever. Our friendship had evolved from neighborly kindness to something resembling family. We traveled, sometimes just for a weekend to nearby towns, sometimes farther, taking small trips that were full of laughter, photos, and memories I had once thought I'd never have. Every corner of the country I visited reminded me that life was bigger than betrayal and fear. I also immersed myself in the volunteer group, organizing programs for long-term hospital patients, helping kids with reading, even teaching a small workshop on financial literacy for teens. These became the moments I lived for. I realized that my purpose didn't need to revolve around family ties that had become toxic. My value wasn't tied to being a mother to someone who refused to see me as a person. It was tied to the lives I touched, the kindness I shared, the peace I cultivated. ... Warm. Then, one afternoon, a familiar figure appeared outside my garden gate. I froze for a second before recognizing Marissa. She looked older, harder, but there was a hesitation in her step I hadn't seen before. I didn't open the gate immediately. I stayed on the porch, arms crossed, watching her struggle to find the words. "Mom," she started, her voice quiet, almost fragile. I wanted to try again. I don't expect forgiveness, not yet. I've learned. I've really learned. I'm sorry for everything." I studied her, the lines of stress etched into her face, the guilt that softened her usually sharp gaze. For a moment, a part of me wanted to reach out, to believe that maybe she had changed. But I also remembered the years of manipulation, threats, and lies. "Marissa," I said slowly, my voice firm but not unkind, "I can see you've learned something. That's something. But understanding the lesson is not the same as undoing the past. If you truly want to rebuild, it won't be on my terms alone. It has to be on yours too. You must show consistency, respect, and patience. Real change isn't sudden. It's proven over time. She nodded, swallowing hard. I understand. I'll try. I will. I wanted you to know I see it now. I turned to look at the horizon, letting the sunset wash over the garden, filling the space with gold and pink light. That's a start, I said softly. But for now, let's give it time. Days passed, then weeks. There was no sudden transformation, no instant reconciliation. And that was exactly how it had to be. Life had taught me that peace wasn't about the absence of conflict. It was about boundaries, choices, and knowing when to protect yourself. I continued with my routines, my garden thriving under my care, my volunteer work growing, and my circle of friends expanding. Each small act, cooking a meal for Sarah, helping a child read their first book, planting new flowers, reminded me that life could be full and joyful, even when family ties were strained or broken. Months later, I received another letter. This time, it wasn't from Marissa. It was from a young mother in the hospital, thanking me for helping her son. She wrote about how my guidance had given her hope and direction. I held that letter close, feeling a warmth that no courtroom victory or legal document could ever replicate. I realized then that the battles I had fought, the courage I had summoned, were not just for my dignity. They were for the life I wanted to live. I had stood up, faced the storm, and emerged not bitter, but strong. I had reclaimed my space, my mind, my body, my peace. And I knew, beyond any doubt, that being alone with dignity was far better than being with anyone who would diminish it. The past no longer controlled me. I no longer feared manipulation or lies. I was free in the truest sense. One evening, as Sarah and I sipped tea on the porch, she looked at me and smiled. You really did it, Evelyn. You lived your life on your terms. I returned her smile, the sunset casting long shadows across the yard. Yes, Sarah, I finally did. And for the first time in my life, I feel whole. The black binder remained on the shelf, a quiet monument to the battles, tears, and victories. But it was more than that. It was my declaration that I would never again allow anyone to steal my peace. My remaining years were mine, to live fully with integrity, joy, and freedom. Marissa may come back one day with genuine change, or she may not. Either way, I will remain steadfast in my life, surrounded by people who love me for me, and anchored in the knowledge that I fought for my right to be respected, and I won. Because in the end, the most profound victory is not the courtroom triumph, not the legal restraining orders, not even the vindication. It's the reclaiming of your own soul, your peace, and your freedom. And finally, I could breathe. My life was mine. My dignity intact. My freedom complete.